Thursday. Thank you for joining. Thank you for putting up with our teething problems. This is a modern, the world that we've had everything. My internet here in the UK crashed, nothing to do with me. Be live, our software we used has crashed, but we have overcome them. Luke, we're joined by Stewart K as well. Stewart, Luke, how are we going?
Greetings. Hi. Good, Andrew. Hi, Luke.
I'm so glad that Stu brought wine.
It's so funny. You watch a lot of the other, these podcasts, and the Smoking Tire. I think that we listen to, and they've been sort of, going with their new studio, and it's X numbers of tens of thousands of dollars, and then you work out that you're like, oh, you don't have these problems if you throw money at the problem.
They have their problems.
They do actually have their problems. Anyway, let's put that behind us. We're now here. We're live. We've overcome our various technical problems. So yeah, we're joined by Stewart K. Stewart has been a motoring identity in, is that fair to say, in Adelaide for the last decades? Is that a fair assumption?
Decades. What'd you say? A motor enthusiast?
Motoring enthusiast.
Yeah.
Stewart owns some, I was going to say, just some very important cars, and has and does own. We featured his probably most famous car in our first issue of Sports Car Safari, which is a very early right-hand drive 901 Porsche, the first 911 in Australia. That's how we met Stewart. But,
that's right.
Stewart's involved in the heritage plate game. Is involved in obviously Porsche, but also the wider range. So yeah, Stewart, give us a rundown. What's in your garage, and what has been in your garage?
Thanks. Well, look, going right back, my father was in the car business. He was a Mercedes dealer here in Adelaide right throughout my childhood. So we grew up in cars and probably went in every car, drove, got to drive in or got to own. Dad would trade something and he'd sort of chuck me the keys and say, take it around the block, and you'd give it an absolute hammering. Try not to hurt it and bring it back with stinky brake pads and engine ticking and go, it's all good. Good car, Dad. And everything, like a luxury car dealer, you can imagine there were Jags and BMWs and Range Rovers and the odd Porsche, the odd Ferrari, but, Mercedes back in the 80s, back when I was a kid, this was quite a different brand to what it is today. Very expensive, very exclusive. A 380 SL or a 560 SL was the car to have. And if you look, even going back to the 60s and 70s, comparatively, the number of SLs they sold versus right-hand drive 911s, a 911 was a real enthusiast car to buy. All the doctors and all the lawyers bought SLs because they had ice cold air and they had plenty of grunt. They were in every Hollywood movie you ever saw. Was the car to have.
Yeah, because I guess it's an interesting, we don't want to get sidetracked already, but it's an interesting point. We kind of forget, for those of us that are sort of a bit newer into the hobby, that Porsche, for my life, Porsche have always been a very big, prominent, famous brand. But when they started at the time that your 911 was a new car, they were a real niche car. Like that was sort of, I don't know, like going and buying if you bought an XE, Lotus XE or something today, it's a bit of an enthusiast choice. You kind of got to know what you're on about. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, look, I think the 901, when that was sold in 65, there's a 250 short wheelbase in Adelaide at the time. That car's still here. And I've got some old registration documents that lists by mark, so starting at sort of AC or Alpha, and halfway through that document it says competitive sundries, and it lists the 3 or 4 what were deemed as competitive cars, and my car 119 is in there, and there was a Lotus that was sold up at Mount Lofty, I think, to a doctor, and I think there was a Lancia as well on that list, and that was the 3 from 1965 that were pulled out of that registration document as competitive. So lots of Jaguars, lots of English cars, very few Japanese cars. So at the time, it was an expensive car. It was very much a connoisseur's choice. The fellow who owned it knew was a car guy, and there's lots of stories about him. So yeah, they were nowhere near as ubiquitous as what they are today.
Yeah. So set us a scene. Adelaide in the 1960s, you had your 901. You had the 250 short wheelbase, as you mentioned, but there was a lot of cool stuff. There was a 2000 GT in Adelaide too at the time, wasn't there?
Yeah,
that still
would have come a little bit later. I think 70s something for the 2000s. Is it 60s or 70s? 60s. And the
60s,
owner of that was bought for his mother. So that car's still here. We had lots of really interesting stuff, like you guys love your Italian things. I can remember in the 80s, I nearly bought a Lancia before I bought the 901, but there was a Flaminia Super Sport here, super rare Zagato bodied car, all sorts of stuff. I can remember Dad traded a Jensen FF. So I remember and I think it was Lance LeCornu's car from LeCornu, the furniture guys, carpet guys. And I remember that car. He was a member of the Cruising Yacht Club, and he had all down the windscreen. He had all the tickets from each of the years. There's about 10 of them. Those little flags.
So cool.
And I think that car's maybe a Birdwood or one of the museums or somewhere. But that was a 6-litre, whatever V8, full drive, ABS brakes. 1960, mid-60s. So Adelaide's just kind of interesting repository where we've got great cars. Housing is reasonable. Everyone's got a garage, so they get looked after.
Some bigger than others.
And we always had a car culture right from way back when, the earliest days of motoring. So we're pretty blessed through one way or another. There's really fabulous cars here. Old and new.
Well, I guess that's really where you found the 901, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that car. So I'm 50 this year, and I've had that car since I was 21. So it's 29 years of fun. And Mum and Dad lived just up at Springfield in Mitcham, and I interviewed an old bloke for a university paper when I was 20, and there it was in his shed. He said, "Mate, what the hell is this? If you want to sell it." And I used to go around there and clean it for him, and I'd say, "Oh, give it a wash and look after it, and let me know if you want to sell it." And I'm not selling this. It was a crusty old bugger, a lovely bloke. He was an architect, and bought the car in '69. Was not necessarily a Porsche enthusiast. Was a pretty wealthy family and fairly well-to-do, and it was even then viewed, I guess, as a luxury symbol or as a premium product. Fortunately, looked after, and I bought it off him in the late '91, early '92. Unmolested, just untouched, original folders full of papers and receipts and speeding fines and the original keys and toolkits and all the stuff that you want.
Medical kit.
Everything's there, it's crazy. And
I was going to say, Stu, can you just before we go too far down this rabbit hole, can you just give us a quick rundown of what this car is? Because it's not just any 901 and why it's special.
Look, the car was launched in '63, as everyone knows, and Ronal Angus put an order in '63 as soon as it was announced. And the word on the street was that, and I've sat next to Alan Hamilton at a Porsche dinner, and we had a chat, super bloke, and he said that they only got allocated a certain number of cars. They got 4 or 6 cars. It's a fairly amazing business model to build your business on. You're going to get 6 or 7 units a year to sell, right? And Angus always had Porsches. He owned the first 356, the fish silver convertible that came in '51. He bought that car new. It had raced and it had done some promotional work with Hamilton. And he then had a series of early A's, a split window car and an A, and had a B. And I was seeing a picture of the B coupe that he had with green inside, and so that'd be about a '62 or '63 car. And when he heard the 901 was released, he ordered one and sort of got the front of the queue, and that's how the car came to to be here in Adelaide. So quite a cool story. And so the factory were busy building left-hand drive cars, and they pulled two lots of two off the line and took them to work one and converted two consecutive chassis number slightly earlier cars. The one that was to become the UK demonstrator, still alive in the UK at the moment. That rego number on the car is MMU 911C. It was
I'll keep an eye out for it.
a second car that was earmarked for Hamilton's and
Oh, you there, Andrew?
Yeah, I think we've got some network issues here.
Yeah.
I've lost you. Yeah.
Andrew's internet has been very slow, but that's all right. We're back.
Yeah, so
We're back.
You're
So-
blabbering off random number plates from history.
So the first two, so that car is alive and well in Australia, but it stayed in Europe until early '66, and Hamilton used it as he was apprenticeshipping in the factory. And then there was a second batch of two cars. My car, stone grey, so a 1957 one-year only colour that Angus specified, and a silver car. And the silver car's a chassis number earlier than mine, but it was completed 3 days later because the silver apparently at the time took more to cure and more to paint and fix. So that car was later. So by chassis number, it was the third one built, and by delivery, if you will, it was the first one sent to a customer. The silver one was the New South Wales demonstrator for Alec Mildren, who was the distributor, the dealer up there at the time. And that car is missing. If anyone's dig up 65901, that's not accounted for.
Yeah,
So I didn't realise. Well, dude, it's probably, to be fair, it's probably wearing an 80s wide body whale tail, and it's probably hiding somewhere under the
Silver with red in right-hand drive. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I didn't realise that your car was actually effectively converted by the factory. So effectively, it was a pre-production right-hand drive car.
Yeah,
I didn't realise.
the 65 cars in right-hand drive. There's 6 that I've got on my list. So Australia got 3 of the first 4, and the next couple went to the UK, and then we got some in September, October, and there was even a fabulous one delivered, I think, Christmas Eve in New South Wales. The sunroof, ski racks, Pepita tree, an AM/FM radio, everything you could get on it. Delivered to a guy in downtown Sydney who likes skiing at Threadbow. So factory ski racks and everything. That's a pretty cool car. Ivory with red Pepita, I think that car was.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
You back, Andrew?
I'm back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
When's
We're
your
having some
internet getting
problems.
back up?
Mate, I don't know. I
We get it.
think
Yeah,
some
that'd be
poor
pretty crazy,
trees put a.
Ivory red.
Yeah, ivory's a great 60s colour that everyone wants Grand Prix white these days, but that off-white is a really great colour, especially with a blue or a green or a red interior. It's a really cool classic Porsche colour, yeah.
And so your car, when we talk about, it kind of put this into context. We interviewed Derek Tamscott in San Francisco for the last issue of SCS, and he has the GT3 Touring, and he did the European delivery of that, and that's his car. He actually he's involved in Issimi at them now, but at the time was working for the dealer Fantasy Junction. And I remember there was something he told us, and I think we put in the story that, he talks about unrepeatable opportunities, and he's sort of saying, like, if you're sort of wavering on a car, is it repeatable? Is it not? If it is repeatable, then you probably don't need to buy it now if it's not the right time. But if it's unrepeatable, then you need to do whatever you can do to jump in. And talking about the history file of your car, I have genuinely never seen anything like that. That, in terms of unrepeatable opportunities, we're talking books, brochures, medical kit. We're talking the key ring that's made out of the same green leather as the seats. We're talking, speeding fines, like anything you can possibly
Rotor's
imagine.
original number plate, which means a lot to me.
Yeah, on a car that's in original condition that hasn't been restored. Like, that's just unrepeatable. It's as good as it gets.
Yeah, look, at the time, I had a little Golf, which was my first car, and it had a little body kit, and it was Mars red and all tricked up. That in the car game, of course, had this cool little car for me, and I sold it because I'd got a company car, and I think the Golf was $5,000, and I was $20,000 just quietly, and you wouldn't buy an engine block for it these days for that, but it was never on the open market. I didn't have to compete with anyone, and it was just the right place, right time. And I knew the car, I loved it, and I wanted it. And I'd done all my research, knew it was an early one, and so I took a loan, paid off the balance, and Mercedes-Benz finance was good enough to back me on a 1965 Porsche. Probably thanks to the old man who, knew the right people, but I paid $300 a month or whatever it was to pay it off, and it was mine after 3 years. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable.
that's amazing. So how often do people try and buy it off you now?
Look, the good. I had this conversation with someone the other day. We were talking about Porsches, and a client of mine who wants to buy a 911, and I said, there's almost no 911 that's a bad car. I mean, a 130 horsepower T is a really super car if you get the right one. A 2.2S or a 911E or a 2.7 Sportomatic from the mid-70s. Mine's got a great provenance and a great history and an interesting story. But I think that the legend of Porsche is such, that car of mine will start, it will go, it will run. Before it went on its adventures to Melbourne and Sydney recently, it had been sitting up at the bend in the museum. And after about 10 turns, we chucked a battery booster on it and off it went, that kind of Swiss watch precision reliability is what they built their reputation on. And getting back to your point, it's a special thing, but I'd be as happy with a 2.7 Targa parked behind me with cookie cutter wheels and a bit of a dodgy paint job on the button, because that's what 911s are. And anyone who owns one, and people will be watching this with their own special version of their 901 sitting, in close proximity, and they love it. And that's that kind of brand loyalty, or that kind of, you have that brand loyalty because it does exactly what it's meant to do. And they go wrong and they can be expensive, but you buy the right car in the first place, and it'll lead you to adventures and fun, and might be a decent investment. If it's only an investment if you sell it, and it's probably not. The mortgage could take a bit of a top. What are you going to replace it with? It's like, what are you going to replace that?
I remember I just love the fact that you actually, as historically significant on it. I mean, your car is globally important. Like, there's no getting around it. It's an important car. And when we did the story, I remember pulling out of the Stirling freeway on-ramp there with you driving, sort of heading towards, Bridgewater, and just anyone who kind of knows that bit, it's a beautiful, just sort of flowing corner, and then the straight over the crest of the hill. And she goes.
It's, a journalist drove it recently, and I said, give it heaps, but you'll rev it off the dial, and it literally will spin the needle around past 7, past 8, and often there's no rev in it, there's no electronics. I'll often look and go, oh, bloody hell. But if it's warm, it's got oil and it gets looked after, and it's got a particularly sweet little motor, that car. Away you go, 950 kilos. It's the lightest one they ever made. It's probably got 160 horsepower, slightly up on what the normal one was ordered with a modified silencer. It's got Weber carburetors that were put on it in 66. I mean, the first owner owned a hill climb track on his property. So I saw some documentation the other day that it had actually done a race in late '65, so it was probably the first 911 that took to a track in Australia as well, which is kind of cool.
Really?
Wow. One of my clients, a good Porsche friend who lives in the Barossa Valley, took a photo of it in September '65 in a little black and white brand, and gave me a copy of the photo only a couple of years ago. And it's in the paddock looking exactly like it is. And interestingly, the windscreen wipers are always parked on the left.
Yeah.
And you think that's unusual, wouldn't they be on the right in front of the driver? But I've always quizzed it, and I've got a photo of the first owner standing next to it, and this photo of the car in September '66 has the windscreen wipers on the other side. And when restorers restore them, they always put them parking in front of the driver. So, but it actually completes the arc and parks out of your way. That's how whether that was a left-hand drive thing, they never changed over. Yeah. But that's how the car was delivered.
I was wondering about the whole left to right-hand drive at the factory thing, because cars like Andrew's X09 and stuff, it's just like Italian stuff. Just hack this out of the tunnel, doesn't matter. Is this car built properly?
Yeah.
There's no, you can't tell that it's been...
Look, it's really interesting. I got under the dash once, and there's all these scribbles in, almost discernible. It's obviously German numbers and stuff. So I've taken some photos of it ages ago, but they were apparently pulled off and built for almost probably Porsche being Porsche. I mean, Hamilton was a VIP outlet. But I'm sure the Germans were like, these bloody right-hand drive markets, we've got to convert the cars, like a pen. But they've done a good job certainly on mine. It's all pretty taut, and you wouldn't know, the trim and everything. You wouldn't know that it was. I mean, it's built as a right-hand drive. There's no sort of chop and stick the gauge.
There's no compromise with anything.
No.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was a lot of money when it was new. And Angus, he was a Kerry Packer of his time. He was a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire of his time. He had a steamer parked down at Port Adelaide with a crew of 10, ready to take him anywhere in the world he wanted to go at the drop of a hat. And that kind of work is spectacular. And all these guys, they invested in. One of their mates rode up to Broken Hill and said, someone found some silver up there. Do you want to chuck £1,000 and we're putting a little company together for PhD, put me down for a few. That's how they roll. Adelaide was a small world, and they all knew each other, and so they had investments other than. I mean, Angus's family were part of the original South Australian settlers, and they sat around some big, mahogany board table in London. And they said, right, our boy, you can have, why don't you take the whole of the Barossa Valley from, the mid-north sort of down to the Adelaide Hills. And why don't you have the southeast, and you can have half of Adelaide proper, and you can have, the mid-north. And that's literally how they divvied it up in hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of acre sections.
Mm.
So, incredibly wealthy, very wealthy.
Because that time.
Sorry.
Go on.
No, you go. Where are you going?
No, I was going to say that the time of colonisation, and make the point that obviously you had to be on the right side of the coin, but it was an incredible, the opportunity to make immense sums of money at that time was immense. I remember when we did the story, Sherry Smith and the Alpha Spider went up to Wiseman's Ferry in the latest SCS and did the story, and I was researching. I was like, okay, what's the story behind Wiseman's Ferry? And it turns out Solomon Wiseman was a convict out from the UK. And basically, in a matter of 3 or 4 years, he obviously was a very smart guy, but managed to turn himself around from being a convict to getting supply contracts, to running this, to building the ferry, to running the pub. He lobbied the government to build the road past the front of his pub. Then he supplied the food to the convicts building the road, and it's like. And he basically turned himself around from convict to immensely wealthy man in sort of 4 or 5 years' time, which these days you just can't do that. That just doesn't happen anymore.
Well, we're a land of opportunity, but Angus, for example, and I don't want to sort of glorify him. He was a crusty old bugger, apparently, but the Angus family, we have our Germanic heritage here because there was a whole lot of persecuted German and Christian guys that they said would come and help us till our land of plenty here, and Harndorf, and certainly the Barossa heritage of the Germans up there is all sort of a result of these guys giving them assisted passage, saying, "Come live here, work, and we'll give you freedom and stuff. So yeah, it's quite a story behind him. He was a Porsche VIP. As I said, he had the first 356 and right-hand drive that was built, and obviously the first 901 he could have. This last car was a really nice E-Sporto that's still alive, about a 73 or 4. I think he passed away in 76, but an interesting guy. You know, he was a member of the Adelaide Club, and I've had it on good authority from 2 or 3 different people that he would leave the Adelaide Club in the 901, and he would call Mount Pleasant, and he would call, I don't know, wherever he needed to, probably Crafers or Stirling, and say, I'll be taking a record run on Don't Stop Me. So he'd ring the police station, and he did the Adelaide Club, which is like the centre of town, to Collingrove, his property in Angaston, in some ridiculous 20 minutes or something. You know, like it's some ridiculous legendary time, because he could, because he was the big guy around town. No one was going to argue with Mr. Angus, because I'm sure the police got their donations for the party at the end. That's how you rolled. But no, there's a legendary. He drove it like a maniac, he drove like a maniac, and would tear through the Barossa. Ironically, my partner Alex is as these things go, is best friends with his granddaughter, and she can remember, rolling around the back of the Porsche in the Grand Interior, and she now runs all the service in Adelaide for AP Eagers, so she's still in cars. But,
Oh wow!
Yeah, Jo's a fabulous girl, and her and Alex have been friends forever, and a small world. But that's her granddad, and that's his car, and she remembers bouncing around it, and in the back of his old 901. So it doesn't fall far. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree,
So
Yeah. So I'll miss crazy Mr. Angus.
I guess now, so obviously your car has been in the spotlight a fair bit recently with this new series. So if I've got this wrong, but a joint project between Porsche centres in Melbourne and Sydney to sort of show off what the exclusive manufacturer program can deliver, and they chose your car.
They rang me and they said, "Look, we've seen the car and we know it, and we'd like to sort of create a homage, and we don't want to go PTS, because we want to show that you can order something pretty unique and pretty bespoke without having to go crazy. I've seen a few stone grey speedsters and stuff which have done of late online, and they look fantastic. And I saw a knockout one. Google it if you're out there listening. There was a speedster stone grey with red for Peter, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool looking car. So, the guy said, let's put an order in and do a sort of special one-off to show what. I mean, you can, if you could take this into Porsche, it'd be quite a cool colour, and so they match it.
Yeah.
And they would have what now looks like a bit of a yellow interior and grey, and they would do that, and you'd write the check and you'd pay it, and that good to your car. It was a beautiful 356 that I think went to England, but I remember it a few years back, and it might have been the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney or the Meyer family's car, one of the cars, and it was this beautiful kind of silver metallic blue, and they matched it from her wedding dress. And she gave, for example, this is a 356 in its mid-50s, and the blue exterior, the blue, and I think the paper still had the swab of the dress that were with the car, but it was a really. So Porsche will do, Ferrari and Mercedes will do the same, but Porsche specifically now, of course, everyone wants a PTS slot for a GT car or any sort of car to get something really unique, interesting.
You can get anything you like, and I think one of my favorite Instagram follow of the last couple of weeks has been a page called @WorstSpec.
I followed that.
Basically all the
with people.
I keep sending the pictures to my son going, oh my God.
So they will do anything you want. Anyway, so but obviously these new editions look much nicer.
Yeah, but did you? So what was your involvement? I just wanted to basically.
No, that came to me, and I've always had a great relationship with Porsche. Nothing special. There's they have a myriad of VIP customers, but I've always said yes whenever they've asked to do something or borrow the car or do a. I think I've been around for the 40th anniversary of the 911 and the the 40th anniversary of the 911 and the 50th, and all the stuff that I've always linked in the cast. So, when they said about this one, I said, sure, of course, yeah. I did say make it manual, but I don't think they do manual in that series.
Not yet, maybe. Yeah. So
yeah,
so that's quite cool. So what else is in your garage at the moment? Because you're obviously not an exclusive Porsche guy. What you've got some very cool other stuff. What you got?
I have got a couple of other Porsches. I did have the matching convertible, so the first 911 SC Cabrio that came into Australia. Is that better?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're right.
And that was a lovely car. In fact, I've owned that car twice. I sold it. I went to work in New Zealand, and then I kept an eye on it and bought it back, and I used that quite regularly. So that was a really lovely car, and it was like a match set. And for anyone listening, everyone wants a coupe because they want to group R it and they want to race around town and stick roll cages on it and stickers. And trust me, after having owned a 911 for nearly 29, 30 years, early 3.2 or 3 litre 911 convertible with the roof off, doing these ones, listening to the engine, driving. You don't have to do 150 to have any fun. It's a cool place to be. And when I was a kid, a 911 convertible, they sold 450 SC coupes here in Australia. They sold 40 911 SC cabs.
Really?
It was a rare car. And it was just the ultimate, it was the coolest thing to have. I mean, other than a dear old family friend who passed away recently, unfortunately, but he had a 930 and I used to see that. And he had 930 on the number plate, and when that car went past, it was like, holy shit. I mean, because the 930, you see 930s a lot these days because they've all come out of the woodwork. But in 1983, when I was 13, to see a 930, you're a pretty serious cat if you bought one. And if you drove it, like this fellow, Bob drove it, and it was just wow. And the same time, the Freedom movie came out and it had the 930 in it. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty cool. It was filmed here in Adelaide. And in fact, have you ever seen Freedom?
No, how about that one?
It's called Freedom, and it was Scott Hicks's one of his early films. And his daughter was in my daughter's class at school, and she went over to a party. His granddaughter, and his daughter, his granddaughter. And we went over to a pool party, and they got chatting to him, and he goes, at the end of the film, not to wreck it for you, but they drive the 930 over the cliff. And he's essentially, and they've got to get out of town. And you see it. I think it was 81 or 2.
Oh, that is sick.
And he races around, and there's all these old HQ Holden police cars chasing him. It's like 930 cuts around the Adelaide Hills and Myponga, and he gets away.
How have we not heard about this?
I don't know. Hang on.
Get on the Freedom. They drove a buck, essentially a wrecked car. They put flared guns over it. I remember speaking to Scott, and he said we should hike down there one day and see if there's anything left of it. And there was a flaming wreck, and he said they had to remove. The environmental guy said we've got to remove it from the bottom of it. So when you drive past the Victory and you go to the North guys, you go up through Myponga and you go to Twisty Bits. They're coming back down towards town. Drove it over one of those precipices there, and it goes bouncing, rolling down the hill. So
how does that movie poster, Andrew?
Yeah, the movie poster is cool. So.
How have we not heard about this?
A guy called John Blake, I think, and he was filming Gallipoli, or one of those really great films. He was a legend, and he had a really horrible accident, which is really, really sad. It's a slightly cheesy film, but it's a pretty watchable, and you can see where Scott Hicks has got his brilliance. But the star of the movies, the Silver 930, and ironically, part of the film is filmed in my father's old showroom in Flinders Street.
Oh wow!
And Ian Cox, who was our Grand Prix office, he had a 300 SR Gullwing, and the Gullwing was on display in the showroom. The guy comes in and he says something like, "Oh, can I check out that car?" And the guy goes, "Hey, listen, mate, why don't you piss off?" I remember Dad and all the sales guys were like, "Oh, this is going to give us a really bad reputation." That's That's not how Mercedes-Benz dealer treats
No.
treats their clients. But the salesman, this guy's looking over Coxey's silver 300S. He goes, "Hey mate, why don't you piss off?" So he goes and steals a Porsche instead. So lock 90 minutes away, get a good bottle of wine, and watch Freedom.
Yeah.
So they wrecked a 930 in Adelaide.
There was a destroyed one. I think the rego number on the car they used in the film is BC 930, and I think that's a famous Melbourne. It's a Vic registered car. A guy called Brian Connell who had lots of really good. He had 1994 Carrera GT, and he had a few. He had a turbo, and they borrowed the car for the film, but they found a wrecked 2.7 or a wreck whatever, and put some flares on it. Took the engine out and weighed it all down. I asked him about this, and they rolled it down the hill, and he had a little plaque on his son. It was at his son's house. He had a little plaque on the wall, 930 Freedom, and very cool Australian Porsche story. So,
well, we have to find that
on YouTube somewhere, but filmed in Adelaide, and a real Adelaide collection, despite the car being Victoria registered. Quite cool. So 930 was the thing,
Yeah. You just blown my mind.
You can see a GT3 or a GT2 RS or anything these days. I was chatting to the Porsche guys here in Adelaide the other day. They've sold 15 GT2 RSs in Adelaide, which is incredible. And even
15 in Adelaide.
15 in Adelaide. The Mercedes guys are always over-index AMG. And in fact, more so than anywhere per capita in Germany. We, in Adelaide, buy more AMGs and more GT Porsches than per capita than any other market in the world. So that really speaks to our car culture. So, 1 million people, we get 15 GT2 RSs. Melbourne with 4 probably got 16, So it's interesting. So we've always had that culture that I talk about for good cars.
About Aston Martin, that Adelaide's the highest per capita of Aston Martin, definitely in Australia and up there in the world as well. But
I just found Freedom DVD for $13 on Amazon. I'm going to go buy it.
It's cheesy but cool, and the car is really the star. And he drives it through paddocks, and he's doing all sorts of crazy. There's some dream sequences where they've like they're on acid or something. It's pretty. They're on acid. It's pretty. It's pretty wild.
We're planning issue 4 of Sports Car Safari. That's a story.
Yeah. I'll get you in touch with Scott Hicks, and you can interview him. And
absolutely,
I could arrange that. I'm sure. Say why did you pick that car? And it was the baddies have like a big black. It's like an old Mercury Cougar or something. To chase these guys, and he realizes that he's got the girl, but he's got to get rid of the evidence. So he's had his flirtation with the 930, and but it's worth watching. It's pretty good fun. Aussie. Late 70s, early 80s cheese. It's right up there.
Please tell me there's mullets.
Yeah, he's got a mullet. He's a handsome rooster, but he's a blonde girl, and crazy 80s hair. And,
did you see the tagline is a stolen car, a beautiful girl, a dreamer on the run. Like, get that in you.
Yeah, I mean, like this. Do yourself a favour. It's gold.
And then the other bit is it's like Freedom, and then the main tagline is grab it while you can. Grab it while you can.
Grab what? Anyway,
I think he seduces an older bird and he steals the car from her.
Come on, mate.
Covering all the put the kids to bed. It's covering all the cougar before it was a thing, So getting back to 930s. I've always loved the 930. A friend of mine, I found the first one that was delivered in Australia a few years back, and a good one was, and not to speak numbers, but a good one was 50 grand, and the guy wanted 75 for this one. And it had a post fall on it, and it was pre sort of phone cameras and stuff, and we were sort of arguing about 5 grand. But that car would have been a great car to have. It was a light metallic green with green carpets and green leather, and it was. Chassis number 16, the first they're all 4-speed, 3-litre car. I've flirted with 930s for a while, and I got the 930 3-litre turbo book only recently delivered to me as a bit of an early Father's Day present. I was going through it. Now, anyone listen to this, I'm going to find it. You're not allowed to find it. But someone in Australia ordered a magenta, so almost purple, with white.
Oh,
76 lines. Man, where's that car? You know, come on. How have I not seen that car? Where is it?
yeah.
Like not the ruby stone, the sort of 164 colour, like a really vibrant, crazy, you know, almost Monaro purple and magenta with white.
It's probably filled with cocaine.
Blue
buried
carpet
somewhere.
Blue carpet. Blue carpets, white leather. The book's really cool if you haven't got it. It's not cheap, but it's got all the chassis numbers listed with all the options and all the colours, you know.
That car.
And that car
was surely delivered with a little Coke mirror in the top.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna have to try and find out. I've got a few little contacts and see where it was delivered, and you know whether it could be bloody ACT or TAS, or you know the first 930 ended up being in Canberra. And I'm glad a buddy of mine ended up with it, and good luck to him. It's awesome. And then we only got 6 in the first year. They came out at 75, and it was about 30 or 40 early cars in total, and they were pretty successful. They were expensive, but they were pretty successful. But you know, someone knows where that magenta with the white and blue carpets is. It's like, you know,
Probably been
the hand of the guy that ordered that in Porsche. Oh yeah, we're going to send a magenta with white leather to Australia. Oh, they're crazy. I'm not belittling Germans. I love the Germans. We're part German ourselves, but you know, it's like the special wishes. You know, some things must come through, and they ring and they say, yes, I've spoken to him, and I've said it's not a good idea. It's not going to look good. You know, yellow with red never works. Don't do it.
The McDonald's spec.
Just don't.
Ronald McDonald's spec.
Pretty funny. But,
Yeah.
So Porsches, you know, where we get to, we were on 911 SC Cabriolets. I've got my old rally car, which is a really special thing, and that was one of those you talk about. What did you say about opportunity? Another, and that was the first 924 chassis that was built in right-hand drive, and that in and of itself doesn't seem very exciting because the 924 isn't, but it's a good little car. I've never published this photo that you're just about to see, but my father passed away last year, which was all very sad for us, and I was going through his the family photo albums and all the stuff that you know for the eulogy, and I found this photo and I was like, holy shit, that's me as an 8-year-old.
No way.
Standing next to the very same car I still own that Dad must have taken the photo back in the film days. And I've gone, hey, Dad, take a photo of me. And there was a 911 in the rally as well. But there's no photo of me standing next to the 911. But there's me as an 8-year-old in 1979. Standing next to
you have that car now.
I've got that car now. That I found in Tasmania, and then it tracked it and went up to Queensland, and we managed to get it out of Queensland and bring it back down to. I met the guy at Rensport in Sydney, and we swapped. Car came with a trailer, and I drove it home from Rensport. So that's needs a resto, but just a super thing to have, and you wouldn't say no. And you know, it's money you didn't even get under and look at it. You just said, "Yep, how much? Okay, let's do the deal."
Yeah.
And that was really special to me because my father and I sort of bought it together, and I'll restore it. And it was driven by Jürgen Barth and Roland Kusmal, and I've been emailing Jürgen. He's a super bloke, and he said that 20,000K rally around Australia was the hardest thing we ever did. We did the Africa Safari. He's won Le Mans. He's done he's done the East Africa. He's done the Acropolis. They've done everything. He said that Australian rally was the hardest thing we ever did. So why did
Porsche Motorsport? Why did they choose the Repco Round Australia Reliability Trial from Porsche Motorsport in Germany as a proving for the new 94?
It was Hamilton was always in the motorsport, and he wanted an entry, and he wanted to promote the 924. You know, early sales of the 924. So that car's a 75 chassis, so they didn't really make them for series production until 77. This is the first right-hand drive car that did the motor shows, and then they pulled it down and they sent some guys out to build it into the rally car. So it had a normally aspirated engine, still the original engine, but they put tricky heads and bits and pieces on it. It's got 928 brakes, full 928 suspension, plates and all sorts of stuff, a roll cage, and they Brock won it, and they had 3 people in Rocky's car. And these guys, there was 2 of them. There's a video of it. Google it. It's pretty cool. I think it's Repco. It's on YouTube. But they're basically in sort of safari suits and no helmets and jeans because we were emailing. Said they had to unlock something like 600 cattle gates.
Oh, yeah.
And through it, and you got to. And those bloody gates that have that funny knob that you've got to kind of
you got to get it at the right angle. And
you got to kind of get it on. You got to get it.
this one's bent, that one's rusted, that one's. Yeah.
It was August, so it was wet in the southern states and hot in the northern states. So they basically, they did one stage for 72 hours straight. They drove around Australia competitively in 14 days. It's incredible to contemplate. You and I could grab a Land Cruiser and we'd go, right, we're going to drive around Australia in 14 days, and there was, and say, and you probably wouldn't be that comfortable, but these guys raced. Yeah. So that car came, I think it was 9th outright, but it was the first car in its class home, and it was an FIA-sanctioned event, so that car was the first front-engine Porsche to ever win an FIA-sanctioned event, and then proving it through this. There's a couple of books that it's in that says that gave the factory kind of the impetus and the okay to produce the Carrera GT and the GTR and the GTS series of cars that they raced. So that little car there is sort of responsible for the front engine program. And I know your previous guest Nick had a 968 Club Sport. I've had a couple of 968 Club Sports, and I love my 911. Front engine Porsches are good. They're a good option. But, if ever you're wavering and you've only got room for one car, a good 944 is a good car, or even a little 924 Turbo would be fun. Certainly any 6-speed manual 968 is a brilliant thing. A Club Sport, awesome.
Your red 968 Club Sport was crazy.
Yeah, I daily drove. My daughter Jess is 15, and when she was born, I lived in Melbourne, and I had an MO30 2-seat car that I drove every day to the office, and probably put 40,000 Ks on that car. And then I moved back to Adelaide, and I found a factory 2+2, but in a 968 CS, which was quite rare. They only sold 6 cars with rear seats in the Club Sport, so I drove that every day for years. And it was an Adelaide delivered new car, and I didn't pay a lot of money for it because no one had sort of said, "Why have you got that? Why don't you?" Porsche. These are cool. These are really great cars to drive. Great cars to own. And I drove it every day. I had a massive boot. We used to take it away, fill it up with groceries, and the dog went in it. Everyone went in it. It had comfort seats. Those Recaros and 2 Big 4. So those Recaros aren't all they're cracked up to be. The comfort seats have a little bit more room. And the MO30 with the limited slip diff and the trickier suspension versus a normal car, there's very little in the real world to tell between the two, and everyone, if they track them, they upgrade them with all sorts of bits and pieces anyway. But the front engine Porsches are cool, and I've scared you Colsey in my manual 928 too. So
that's good. Mate, just back to that Club Sport. Back to that Club Sport. I know that everyone, no one really cares, but everyone has cars they should have bought. And my 2 automotive regrets is not buying a red 6.5 Macklin with my friend David Rositas for about $17,000 when he bought his. My other one is, I reckon at about the time before we bought our little place in Adelaide, we had this deposit saved up, and I heard through a friend of a friend that you were selling that red car, and I was like, oh, and I didn't. That would have been
it had done 150,000 Ks in the end, and it was, I probably put 50,000 Ks on that car. And, again, I bought, it's rude to discuss money, but it wasn't that long ago. I paid 22 grand for it and cleaned it up. And, I don't know what they're trading for now, but it's not going to be. And they had a 250 horsepower engine, a 6-speed manual, a competition kind of set up by Porsche, icy cold air conditioning, a 4-cylinder, cheap to insure with Shannon's, cheap with Rego. Parts were pretty readily available. Any of the specialists could look after it. And, I used it and took it on holidays, and I've had probably maybe collectively over the last 20 years, 6 years total ownership of 968s, CSs, and they've been great things to own and drive every day. I mean, I've got a diesel Cayenne now, which is probably a much more practical thing, but it's not a red with red wheels and white graphics, 968 CS. Get to do broggies in up and down the street. So
I remember seeing it on the street quite often, and just like in awe every time I saw it, because there's something about like color coded wheels that's just.
See, I am a big, and don't take it personally anymore, but I hate black wheels. And I see 968 CSs with black wheels, and it's like, man, they had silver wheels or they had body coloured wheels, and a white with white, 968 CS with red lettering, I think would be brilliant. We got this one Riviera blue car that is from Melbourne, so only one of we got 60 in Australia, and only one of them was in that blue. I don't think we got any yellow ones. We got plenty of red and white ones. My MO30 car was midnight blue, and so dark you couldn't even see the badges, and it had no badges, and that was sold me to a doctor in Perth who they had a Mark series that they wanted him to race in, and he didn't like 911, so he bought this car, and that one was in pretty good nick, and no decals or anything like that. It was just midnight blue with white wheels, and had the brace across the rear seat, being an MO30 car with limited slip diff and tricky suspension and all that stuff. But that was a nice car. But
so am I missing something? Before I met you, I remember seeing that Club Sport at IKEA. Did you used to tow a trailer with it, or am I am I off?
Didn't have a tow bar. No.
But I definitely remember seeing it loaded up with IKEA boxes.
Should have had a beer fridge on the top of it or something.
Yeah, so maybe I'm thinking
those rear hatches can suck up a whole lot of gear. If you're going away on holiday or doing it, done Grand Prix rallies and stuff, not in a CS, but really practical car. What little outfit's behind us, there's 2 seats with a big hatch. They're practical things to chuck a heap of gear in, and you can have bags and pop the hood and get a whole lot of stuff in. The little rear seats in the red car are perfect for a young kid, so similar to the size of a seat in a 911, and they're all safe and secure in there. And my daughter used to tuck away in there, and she'd be happy as Larry, no problems at all. So, it's a good thing. And in fact, I only sold that car to buy back my SC convertible, which at the time the price was equivalent. So I essentially bought what did I say, a $22,000 911 SC convertible. So,
oh my god,
you get lucky, and you trade up, and that car. I kept tabs of the owner, and for what I sold the CS for, I bought the SC cab, which I had for a number of years, and just before the rise went up, and that was lucky, I guess.
I think Andrew disappeared. Yeah, I don't know what happened. We'll see. Anyway, there's like body coloured wheels that era are really kind of come into their own now.
I agree. I guess if you think that car, we first got 968s in about 92, so they were probably planning them around the late 80s, and we all know what the late 80s were like. So, the Porsche guys at head office were planning a run of lighter weight, CSs with body coloured wheels, and probably the late 80s, early 90s. And I do like them. I think if I was ordering something new or tricky, I saw some of the GT2s and GT3s now with these gold wheels are pretty cool. I like the gold wheels that they're putting on those cars, and just don't like black wheels. And I've never been a fan. I like a nice silver wheel, impossible to keep clean.
Yeah, I reckon body colour wheels need like a smaller wheel for them. Like I don't think you can do it with like a 19 or a 20 or something.
No,
I reckon
that's right.
Weird.
And the older cars too, about the era of my 901 with sort of ivory or white wheels and hubcaps is pretty cool too, like the old Lancias and things like that. If you had a Steely I've got an old Land Rover with white Steelies and it's a disco, an early disco, and it's cool. It came with these Range Rover 3-spoke alloys, which were horrible, but I dug up a set of old spoked Land Rover disco wheels and sets the car off. They're kind of a cream colour, and the car's British Racing green. It's cool. It looks great. So that's fun.
Are Disco ones having their moment? Or are they yet to have their moment?
I don't know. I think
Maybe, but
I've got a good one. I've got a 140,000 K 94 car.
it's not even running yet.
No, it's not, and it's a V8 manual, so it's the 3.9, the last. But the cool thing about this one, it's a 2-door, so it's a Disco 2-door that had one previous owner. And in fact, I chased him across the Adelaide Hills one day, and he turned down this driveway, and I sent him a letter. So I want to buy your car, and it came back to me about a month later, address unknown from the post office, and we've still got it in the file for that car, but it came up for sale. They traded it in and bought a Mazda 3.
Oh,
so I chased it down.
That's beautiful.
And I tow it, and it's got a tow bar, and we live up in the hills, and I fill it full of wood, and it's been a fun little thing. I bought it for my son to drive, and he's with family. I've got a short wheelbase G-Wagon as well that he's commandeered, but it's kind of like too good to give an 18-year-old, so I'm quite happy to have it as a spare car. So will they have their moment?
I was going to say that
I've got a 4-door Range Rover that I'm never going to restore, sitting at home, and sort of like this is a far better proposition than restoring a 1983 Range Rover. So depending on what's a really good low 200,000 case Range Rover 4-door with the old dash, give me a yell if they want a resto project, but I don't think I've got one in me. I'll buy all the 2-door Discos I can find instead, I think.
Yeah. Mate, is it rusty? Is your Range Rover rusty, or is it pretty good?
It's pretty good. All the tricky things like the rear screens rust and all that stuff, but no, it's in an Adelaide car. It's in really good nick, and they say the mechanicals are awesome, so and the interior is pretty good. So it's probably all there, but it's the 2-door, but it also wasn't, 40 grand or whatever you got to pay for a 2-door restoration.
Yeah, 2-doors are getting expensive now.
So it's an auto, and it's let me get this right, the 3-speed auto is better than the latter 4-speed. The early ones have got a bit of a better torque or something. They're a better car, better gearbox. So. But I don't think I'm going to restore it.
Mate, we'll sell it into the UK where they've all rusted away.
Yeah, that's right.
Probably pay a premium for that. Yeah.
Wasn't there a thing with Escorts as well where people were selling 2-doors like crazy into the UK because there was just no good 2-doors?
There's no good anything over here. basically, seriously, old cars over here are they're either survivors or they've been restored and they're very, very expensive, or they're very cheap and affordable, but they're rat shit and you wouldn't touch them. There's not much in the middle. Like, it's very hard to find a good solid base. You either need to do everything or you buy a concours car that's ready to go. There's very little in the middle.
Your little Fiat Coupe was cool.
My X19.
No, the little, the Fiat, with the body coloured interior. What is it?
Oh, the Fiat Coupe. Yeah, actually Fiat Coupe. Yeah. That was a cool car. That was sort of bought as a bit of a group thing actually, and it was a cool thing, very cool thing. But made us a bit scared. It's from that era where stuff goes wrong and it's I don't know, front end of the car off to change a clutch or something like that. So it's they are a little bit a bit scary for me. And it was good, but for me it wasn't good enough to justify the risk and the complexity of having it. Which is kind of
more reliable.
Mate, the boxes don't get me started. I'll talk for hours. I'm an evangelist, but no, the boxes.
Except for when you called me up the other night.
I had a look at one today, and it was his view of original and my view of original with respect. We're quite different, but I think, you could a banger Boxster, as I keep saying. I'm looking for a banger Boxster, but a decent one's a good car. They weren't cheap and they were new, and they do everything a sports car's meant to do. And I think they made plenty of them, but the difference, like any of these good things, and this is almost the difference between Porsche and Ferrari. Porsches get used, they get dirty, they get wet, they have accidents. They're out every day, whereas most Ferraris are tucked away in the shed and rarely get used on weekends or something. They're just different DNA. But Our Boxer would be fun, I reckon. A hard top would be great.
Mate, they're an incredible quality car. Like I think I've said in the podcast before, but we have a Mazda 3 as well, which is 10 years newer. And you put your head under the two cars, it's done 40,000 miles less, and it's 10 years newer. And it looks so much worse underneath. The Boxer is just the weathered ceiling, and it's just so much better. And yeah, like I kind of bought this thinking it was going to be a bit of a lockdown project, and it was going to be a thing. But really, at the end of the day, we put a set of brakes on it, did a oil change, fix some water leaks. I've done 2,500 miles now and haven't really touched it, and it's been fine. And yeah, I need to. Yeah, I topped it up. It took a litre. We've got a bit of a funny story, actually.
Tell the story about it. That's a good one.
Did you
Luke,
go with manual or an auto?
It's manual.
It's a manual.
Manual.
So even an auto,
So basically,
would be okay if you were peeling the roof back. But
Maybe.
if it's your only car, you want a manual. But if it's something you're going
the
to
manual's
toodle around in on the weekends, and an auto and tip trikes aren't that great. But an auto would be a great condition auto over a crappy condition.
Yeah.
Manual is probably going to be a better car.
But no, we had a bit of a heart attack.
You had a moment.
I had a moment. I thought it's timing. So I was driving down to the London, to Concours Elegance, actually, Hampton Court Palace. So driving down, and we're all in my, as you do. Actually, the thing in the UK car scene, which you just generally don't have to do in Australia, is you usually have to iron a shirt and press your pants before you go to an event, which is a new thing for me. But anyway, driving down, had a great drive, just belting through, and I was like, this thing's great. And then I was chatting to Luke on the phone, and I was literally,
this is great. Not too long.
And I'd actually started, the last couple of days, I sort of started pushing it a bit further. And I had one particular driver, I kind of, starting to get it moving around on the road a little bit. And I'm sort of got the bug to get back into doing some more track stuff. And, for the last couple of days, I've been thinking, I was like, we need to take this thing to the Nürburgring and maybe do some Nürburgring and maybe start doing some track days. And what do I need to do to get ready to do this? And, I was just getting really enthused. So I was telling Luke about this, and I was like, mate, I was worried about this car, but I think it's so stout. And literally, the timing was exactly in this conversation. I was like, I think it's so stout. And I was like, this engine, I was a bit worried about it.
Hey, because Porsches are so reliable, and I'm having such a good time with this thing.
And I was like, I think these engines are stout. And I was like, I think they're a bit like the Alphas, as long as you maintain them, but you can drive them as hard as you like, and they'll take it. So track's probably fine. And then as I'm saying this, I look down, and there's a bright red light flashing. The temperature light is just flashing.
Over now, light.
And I was like, oh man. I was like, the timing, literally mid-sentence of crapping on about how reliable it is. And oh man. So I was to Luke, okay. Yeah, I'll call you back. Like, pulled over off the M25, which anyone who's been to London knows it's, 5-lane wide highway. So kind of made my way across the lanes and pulled off and stopped, and car was driving okay, but the temperature light was flashing. And yeah, as it turns out, it's the low coolant light, and the water had just dropped a little bit, and it was fine. Topped it up, and it's good to go. But that moment was definitely
we've all had those.
Definitely.
My son's driving an old G-Wagon, which is cool. When I was 15, Dad borrowed a G-Wagon from Mercedes-Benz Australia, and we drove it on a school trip across the Simpson Desert. So it probably was the first G-Wagon that went up. It was a diesel, and probably couldn't pull the top off a rice pudding, but it was really cool. And we could do about 90 on the freeway, but we could do about 90 on the sand. Pretty cool. The Toyota diehards and all the Rangies back then, were like, but it was a great thing. So we've always had a soft spot for G-Wagon. So Dad got one out, a short wheelbase out of Japan, which is a really good little car. And my son rang me the other day from the side of the road and said, Dad, all the lights are on the dash. The temperature's up, and I'm like, pull over. And as it was squeaking a little bit, just an old fan belt. But the solution to problems that are a $20 fan belt are good. But, when all the lights flash at you, you kind of panic a bit. So the young kids, you have to experience, the mechanic, get a mechanical sympathy. I'm not a rich monkey. I can't grab a set of tools. I can do basic stuff, but and precision stuff like a Porsche, I guess you got to sort of get the right guys to look after it, so you know that you can actually drive it reasonably hard and that you're not going to damage it or damage yourself. So touch wood. There you go. So good mechanics important.
But I've actually found, the interesting, I guess, the other end of the spectrum, I've kind of got no choice but to maintain the box to myself. And I've just been learning, and I've actually found it, I guess I'm not starting from a great place. I'm starting from having restored a Fiat X19 and, so this is not a great place to be, no point of comparison, but I've actually found it a really easy car to work on and just really well thought out, and there's nothing on it that I don't think I'd tackle. Like, okay, ACST being mid-engine, there's a few things that are a bit challenging, but largely speaking, it's all pretty good actually. I've been really impressed with it.
And that's the beauty. If you've got a little bit of mechanical sympathy and you can see how, usually if you can take something apart, you can work out how to put it back together. But I can remember having a conversation with the chief mechanic in Mercedes in the days when they had 300 SE or 6.3s and 6.9s and things like that, that kind of era. And he'd moved from Holden, and he just said, I cannot believe how much better these cars are built. And when you got to change something, or you got to get a nut, or you got to access an opening, or get off a pulley, or do whatever, how logical it is that you get a wrench up there. Whereas lesser made cars, let's not pick names, but and some Mercedes, obviously, and Porsche are the same. You can't believe how guys who work on them day in day out can't believe how good. And maybe something like an old Land Rover, maybe not so good. But the German stuff is traditionally pretty good. The Italian stuff's good, but there's a lot of passion.
Stuff's a nightmare.
Still a Ford Spark Plug. You need
before I
30 universal joints to get to the 4-cylinder Spark Plug.
I don't want to say a bad thing about someone else's car.
We do all the time. Go ahead.
Well, like I nearly before I bought the old 901, I was sort of into cars, and I found a Fulvia Zagato in Melbourne, and it was an alloy body car, an early car, a really nice creamy yellowy sort of champagne colour with black, and Australian car, and actually they were a famous racing family. And in the end, that sort of push came to shove, and they didn't want to sell it. But I've always had a soft spot for Zagato cars, and I'd love to own a Flavia or a Flaminia or a Fulvia Zagato one day. And just cool thing about a Lancia is it's a little bit left of centre. It's like kind of a McLaren owner. You didn't buy a Porsche, you didn't buy a Ferrari. You bought a McLaren. Okay, right, cool. It's like you didn't buy an Alfa. You bought a Lancia. You didn't buy a Fiat. You bought a Lancia. So they're pretty cool cars. I'd love it. If I had an Italian sort of car affair, I'd like a 60s V12 Ferrari, but also don't want the cost of it. So, a little Fulvia, or even a non-Zagato, a little Fulvia Coupe, and make that look like a little rally car. It'd be a pretty cool car. It'd be something.
I might know of one that's not for sale, but could be the right arm twisting.
Yeah,
and Luke, you know the one too. You know the car too.
Yeah,
up in Brisbane.
I was at uni, and one of the girls at uni in my class, her dad bought her a Fulvia Coupe, and she used to go to the uni. And we're only talking 1991, 92, but late 80s, early 90s, and that was their family car, and that was her grandfather's car, and it had been passed down the family. And I bumped into her every now and then. She, the bloody thing rusted apart. I said, where did you keep it? No, we got rid of it. We wrecked it. And you should have just put it in a shed somewhere and just kept it. It was red and original ACST plates and everything. But but again, these things, they get used and they have a shelf life. And if you've got any like that Fulvia Zagato was alloy on steel, and the catalytic rust on the bloody thing. It's just, you get into it. It was a really early 1.2 alloy bodied Zagato for sale. It was a left-hand drive car, and it was on all the you have all these alerts and you look at stuff just out of interest. But this thing was like a cheese grater, because it had come out of wet America, not dry America, and had been sitting in various sheds and people not wanting to touch it. And someone will have got it, and it'll be brilliant. It's that beautiful Lancia blue. It'll be a brilliant thing when it's done. But you can tackle a project. I'll tell you about a great project that we once had. But you think you're going to spend 20, and you've got to make it. It's going to be 100%. You're going to spend 5 times what you think. So these are hard.
Yeah.
So go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to reminisce. My father was in the car scene, and I'm speaking about that a lot tonight. But he probably inflicted me with the bug.
Thanks.
But
Dad's good at that.
I've always loved the Austin Healey's, and
My dad
I was
was
really favouring, a Healey 100 would be a cool car, and they'd fold down windscreen, and I was sort of favouring an English car, Healey 100 would be a really cool thing. And Dad was overseas with Mum. They were travelling, found this car. It was here in Adelaide, and I think it was on bloody eBay or something ridiculous. And I collected watches for years and always done deals, and had some really nice old Hoyas that I ended up sort of selling to a guy in America, and I had a bit of spare money, and I thought, you look around and money doesn't last long in your pocket and spend it, as everyone watching this probably knows. Next one, I'll have a touch of that.
Sparkling
whatever comes, that's cool. And I rang Dad, and he was over in, I didn't tell you where they were, and I said, I found this Austin Healey, and I think I'm thinking about buying it. It's for restoration, restoration. And he said, you don't need a restoration project, son, like good dads do. And no, it's really cool. It's got this really cool history. He said, what do you mean? I said, tell me about it. And I said, it's this thing called the Healey Rocket. It was a 53 Healey that had a 6.2 litre supercharged Oldsmobile rocket engine put in it in 54. And he said, buy it. I helped the guy build it. He was my best mate. He came to your mother and my wedding. I know the car well. So we ended up buying it, and this thing, it was pretty cool. It was pretty famous. There was an article in a magazine from the late 50s saying the Healey Rocket is the fastest accelerating sports car in South Australia without a doubt, because it used to do drags, and it used to do circuit racing, and it used to do dirt racing, and it was kind of cool. It was it had all these rockabilly stickers and stuff on it. It was sort of like a rockabilly kind of James Deany kind of car, but an English sports car, and raced against the Lotuses and the 356s and all the Clubmans and all the cool things. So it sort of transcended all the different sort of sports categories. But we had it in the shed for about 3 or 4 years, and it's really far gone. And again, I don't want to say a bad thing about someone else's car, but you can get all the bits and pieces that it was an alloy body, and it had a special nose put on it, and had a stripe on it, and I'll post some photos on my Instagram.
Yeah.
It was cool. I had a scrapbook of all the races that had won and everything, and one thing led to another, and we sort of the guy who was the guy to restore it ended up buying it, and it was from that car that it was when the 924 Rally came along, and it was like, do I want the Healey Rocket that's got a bit of it's been changed around from an original Austin Healey, but it's still got a great history. It was without an engine, so we didn't have an engine. The Oldsmobile engine had disappeared off. Or do I want to, semi competition Porsche factory built, race car that had won the first win of its category in a first front engine win. So sort of something had to go. The Healey's Healey, who you'd say, let's spend 50 grand fixing it, if I want to pick another number. You go, well, look, we've taken the wheels off and we've done this, and we're 50 grand in. How much more do you want to spend? That's just how it goes. But, it'll do a great job. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be unreal. And that car really appealed to me. It had big fat wheels and disc brakes, and it was red with white, and red and white seats, and it was a real historic, cool car that you go, if you get it registered, you go to any Cars and Coffee or something if that's important to you. You blow everyone away. It had, I think he said 375 horsepower. It had a truck supercharger on it that was like this big. So the guy who owned it had a trucking business, and he used to, in the scrapbook, he used to just bring it into the meets on a low loader, and they used to just used to tilt the truck and put some ramps in, and there it go. And in Adelaide, I've got a photo of it laying black marks down at the weapon WRE. It was called the Weapons Research Institute at Edinburgh. On the airfield there, they'd do drag, they'd do meets, and you'd go along with whatever. You see these old sort of dragsters that are 20 feet long with tiny little wheels and an engine, and then the sort of guy sitting way at the back sort of going, "Wee," you know, all these sort of things. That, I'll post some pics. It was a super cool. It's still in Adelaide. The right guy owns it, and the right guy's going to restore it. It'll be a knockout. It'll be unreal.
Yeah, that's
Cool. So I guess we've been dancing around this for a little while. Your latest.
Oh, so, you know, speaking of competition cars. Well, I sold the SC cab, and it was a funny thing. And you know, as I say, go buy yourself a 911 convertible if you're in doubt. I think a 996 convertible with a 6-speed manual will be a super car. Well, I was sort of umming and ahhing, and I've probably never really, you know, as the values, I've always sort of been able to buy things at a reasonable price without having to outlay, I guess, what's stupid money. I mean, it's the trick. We've all got families and commitments and houses and stuff. So, yeah, money in is very quickly goes on other special projects, as we all know. But I saw the first, what apparently was the first GT3 that was delivered here in Australia, that Peter Fitzgerald bought and turned into his race car, and saw it advertised. Wasn't in a position at the time. I thought, gee, that's reasonable money for what I think is a really special car. And it was
when was that?
That was about a year ago. So the previous owner only sort of hung on to it for a year and had some really great adventures with it. He's a super fellow, and we made acquaintances over, you know, internet and whatever as you do. And I sort of dropped him a note and said, look, mate, you know, if ever you think about selling, think of me first. I'd love a run at it. And not expecting, you know, call me in 5 years' time or 3 years or 10 years, and I might be able to scratch up, you know, whatever it is going to be worth at that point. But he sort of said, oh, look, my circumstances have changed, and I'd be, you know, you seem like a pretty, I know your car, I know your old cars, and you seem like it'd be a pretty good custodian. So, you know, you want to do a deal? I was like, oh, shit, okay, well, that works out all right. We might be able to, you know, make that work. So, you know, one thing led to another, and this was, I guess, we first started speaking in beginning of the year. COVID and all the stuff happened, and I sort of sent a deposit, and no one was in any sort of hurry to finalise it. And he was overseas, and so one thing led to another. But it arrived last week, which is pretty cool. So I fully plan to get it road registered again. You know, it's a Nations Cup car, so it raced with the 360 Challenge Stradales and the big GTR. So this is the
Falcon liveried GT3. So anyone that was at Clipsal 500, what, 2000?
2000, and they did the Clipsal. 2000. They did the Le Mans race as well, that I think it raced at also.
Yeah, really. So you would have seen this car. Yeah, as a kid, I've seen that racing
at the time, and yeah, there it is. Where is it? I'll find it. You'll find it. Yeah. Yeah, put Fitzy. So look, yeah, it was one of those ones, and I haven't driven it yet, and I haven't sat in it. But
oh, really? Oh man, have you done so do I. What are you doing tomorrow? Let's go.
It's in race car spec, so it's there's the ad for it, right? And it's got a roll cage. It's got the original roll cage that it raced with. So it was manufactured just down the road from Fitzy's place in Melbourne. Ironically, Fitzy looked after my 968 CS when I was I lived in Melbourne, the Midnight Blue one. So I sort of. I've ummed and ahed, and it was certainly the previous owners. Not challenged, but he was in Perth, and it might have been quite hard in Perth to register it. So, you know, one thing led to another, and I sort of right place, right time. So I thought, shit, it's such an iconic livery. The car was second in the championship in 2000 and third in 2001. Jimmy Richards won the championship both years in the sister car to this one. Both Richards and Fitzgerald picked them up together on the dock and drove them to Vic Roads and got them registered, and then took them to their workshops, and off they went. So it's the last, in my mind, the last road registered GT Porsche that raced. And, you know, some good brothers, good friends of mine have got hi, they're listening, Aaron and Ben, they got an RS Carrera that they're restoring back to its Irish rally spec in aubergine in a purple with, you know, CB and decals and everything on it, and, you know, that car's going to be something else. But it's a road registered 2.7 RS. And this is not obviously a 2.7 RS, but it's the last of the the road
It's the same thing.
registerable Porsche racing cars that has a history, that raced at Mount Panorama, it raced at Adelaide, it raced at Sandown, it's raced at Wakefield Park, it's raced at the Gold Coast. It's been, been everywhere. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to, I think it's sort of, I said to someone the other day, it's, cars have phases of their lives, and, I guess road cars, classic cars go from being a road car and then they become classic stuck up in a shed, and this thing sort of had a competition life. Its first phase was a competition life. Second phase was as a club car. Like it had a 997 engine in it, a GT3 engine in it at some point.
Really?
Still got air jacks in it, so there's a little aperture by the window where they pump it up. So we'll have to take those out for registration. And we'll have to do little things, I think, like put an airbag steering wheel back in it, which you can buy directly from Porsche. I asked the other day. It's got a non-standard Porsche gear lever, and I'll stick a normal one, which you can order straight from Porsche again, and not at a not horrendous price, which is quite surprising. And I'll probably have to cut some of the cage, but I think whilst that might be a shame, you can keep all the bits. But the third phase will be and I want to stick the air conditioning back in it. It was delivered with air conditioning, so still got the panel where the air conditioning buttons are, and I won't have a compressor, and I won't have all the, hopefully the ducting and stuff still there. But I think that'll be a pretty longer term, something I sort of would not move on. Be a super fun thing to have. And ironically, as I was saying before, only just a couple of days ago, one of the guys here in Adelaide from the club dropped me a line and said, "Hey mate, someone's selling a front and a rear Oz set of one front, one rear Oz rims in Sydney on the Porsche Facebook Marketplace or something," which I never look at. You better get in touch because they're going to be perfect for your new car. And I was like, "Oh shit, really?" And reached out to him, and he was a super fellow. And I've made friends on Instagram with a couple of guys who actually built these. And one guy called James in Melbourne, and I sent him the specs and said, "Mate, I've got no ideas. Is this the right rim for my car?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're the right rims." And they were 10 grand a set with no new, magnesium Oz rims and the right offset and the right size. So I'm going to have so these things, you don't expect to have to outlay when you haven't even got it registered yet. But you talk about opportunity. If you could, one you could spend 6 months looking for a 1999 or 2000 Oz, racing magnesium rim for the car. So that's sort of gratuitous. So I owe some red wine around town and some beers to say thanks. So yeah, it'll be fun. Certainly the most I've ever spent on a car. But I guess the one goes in and one goes out. And if you had, I'd probably the only more storied one would be Jim Richards' yellow car that won the championship the first year and the second year, and then the final.
Where is that now?
It's around. Yeah, it's owned by a fellow in Melbourne. And who would know what it's got? And I'm not a big fan of yellow cars, and that's cool. So for me, the race history. He's a great history. Richards is a super driver, but Fitzy's pretty cool, and the livery's pretty cool.
It's amazing.
It's blue metallic.
I think it's a nicer looking car, because I think like the Richards car, that is a yellow car with stickers on it.
Yeah.
Whereas the Falcon livery it's a proper livery. Like it's a really neat looking car.
Even at my first sort of 10 minutes looking at it, all the details are pretty cool. You get inside, it's got door cards have all been stripped, and it should be fun. So I hope that we'll be able to get it registered. But in the words of my mechanic, so we've gotten harder than that registered before. So we'll go through all the all the right channels and take out anything, make sure it's meet all the requirements, and I might have to go back and forth to Regency.
They'll get their money for it.
Regency's where for anyone listening not in Adelaide, where you got to line up and say, "Yes, sir, can you have a look at my car?" And get the black, they get the red text around.
Yeah.
Oh bloody hell! And it's the middle of nowhere.
Xander on the first
some guy.
Xander on the first podcast we ever did. He went through his trials and tribulations and registering.
Xander told me about the rims, which is cool with him. So yeah.
Oh, Xander, of course he got rims.
Yeah.
You find steering too.
No. So that'll be fun. So, of course, you want it tomorrow, but I think Cedar shipped it over from Perth, and I think we had 3 goes at it because it's got a battery cut out and it's got an isolator switch. It's got all these tricky things. So I finally got here. But it was Conrad, who's a fellow in Perth, helped, and I sort of said, make sure you drive around the block a couple of times to see that it's running all right. So he's posted a couple of videos of it flying up and down the road. So that's good to see. So I may have to take, because I'm a big guy, I'm 6'4", I may whip the GT3, the seats out and put something a little more comfy in. But like anything, if it's not comfy, and you're just not going to use it. So if the third phase is not ruining it or changing it too much, but making it a little bit more road friendly, there's a group of guys do when we get back into the real world. It'd be the sort of thing that you and I could do, for example, a weekend or a week's rally, and not be too uncomfortable, and chuck our bags in the back, and you could drive to Melbourne, Sydney, and back, and it'd be a pretty cool adventure. So that's the loose plan. But I was, I'm grateful that it was sold to me, and I'm surprised that I had the opportunity. And sometimes the universe, you're in the right place, right time. So that's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
Need to borrow a shed. I haven't told the boss at home yet, so she won't be. What do they say? You ask for forgiveness, not permission. There's a 50-year-old and a young buck. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Place for it somewhere.
Shift something out.
Not my car. Where'd that come from? I've never seen that before in my life.
I'm just borrowing it.
Where'd that come from?
I'm just borrowing from a mate for a while.
That's an old mate of mine. It's Andrew's car. Yeah, Luke's car.
Yeah.
No, it's
I think I heard about.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The funny thing as well about that is unless you really know, I've got a bit of a running joke going on about every time I see something early 2000s Porsche, I'm like, it's basically a 986 Boxster, to the point where we were at the concourse the other day and we saw the 911 GT1 that won the mod. And we're just like, yeah, it's basically a Boxster, So I'm just making the point that if you're talking to the untrained eye between that GT3 and a really cheap, shitty Boxster, they probably wouldn't really pick the difference. You probably could pass that off as it's a old hack race car. It's
I've been into watches forever, and you could collect Rolexes because they all look the same, and you could have 10 of the bloody things, and your significant other would go, "Oh, it's just a shiny." All look the same. You'd wear a different
got
one
this for 15 grand.
Wear a different one for a month, and no one would know it was a different one. At least it looks really new.
Yeah, the Vulcan car. Yeah, I picked it up for 15 grand. Couldn't say no. It was great.
I swapped. Don't know. But anyway, so that's exciting. I'm looking forward to. Haven't sat in it. Like I tried to get in the other day and had my boots on. And the cage comes right down. Fitzy's a little guy, but it's often one should always try and drive a car, fit in a car, before one buys a car. But I'm 6'4", so I can't fit in a Miura. That's off the list. Not that I was ever going to probably buy a Miura. Countach, can't fit in a Countach. So I know the guys down at Richmond's and that really great green one down there. I tried to squeeze in there the other day. I'm like, right, that one's off the list. But, take my 65 901's got so much room. I can sit like I'm sitting now. There's no tunnel or anything, and it's got plenty of movement. And surprising, it's a little car. And when you see it next to the current 992 in some of those photos, it's a dainty little car, and it's funny how we've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But I'm sure I'll squeeze myself into this one.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Or you can get on Jordan Roddy's hashtag of big guys and small.
Okay.
So what is it that he's doing? Like
big guys in small cars.
Okay.
The sport motor cars.
Just poking up out of this box. Just the seat drop was buggered with a little switch on it. So I was trying to, that's very fresh air as you're driving along this.
Mate, actually, Boxsters are good. I've got with the hardtop up, I've got a solid but I'm 6'2", just over 6'2".
Yeah.
And there's an inch and a bit of headroom in the hardtop of mine.
Yeah,
you'll be fine in the Boxster.
Cool.
Well, helps you have much hair on the top, right? Helps you have much hair on the top.
It's being fine.
Steady on. That was setting confidence offline anyway.
Yeah.
So
they're probably the last fun one's the green car Colsey that I sent you a picture of. Big green man.
Yeah, that's That's a beautiful.
That's a pretty special thing. So,
you know, I don't know my I'm going to bugger it up. You might as well tell us what it is because I'm going to bugger up the nomenclature of it exactly. I just know it is probably the coolest Merc in existence. It's a very cool car.
Yeah, as soon as I like posted that picture in Sportscast Ferrari, Daniel Scott jumped on and was like sending me pictures of like Peter.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. So in you know, we talk about sort of rare cars. I guess the 901's pretty rare. This is my father's car, and as I said, Dad passed away last December, which was tough as anyone who's lost a dad knows. And he was the Ben Steeler, you know, right through the late 70s, early 80s, and you know, when he retired, he bought himself a couple of toys, and this is one of them. And it was a supercar. They sold 6 of them new. 6 came into Australia. We got 2 in Adelaide. And this was owned by a fellow new called Tom Barr-Smith. So the Barr-Smith family had our library in Adelaide, and they lived up at Bergscape where the big development was. And I sold Tom's number plate for him a few years ago, which was 17. This car didn't have 17 on it, but he bought it for his wife. So it was like horrendously.
So just to interrupt you, Stu, sorry. For our audio listeners, what is it?
So it's a 1971 280 SE 3.5 convertible. So it's a big, you know, it's the car that's in The Hangover that the guys pretty much destroyed. And we watched a Hollywood film the other night called The Nice Guys, I think it was, with Russell Crowe. He's driving around in one of these. But it was the real, you know, like a Corniche. I think they were even more expensive than a Corniche convertible back in the day. So hand built. I remember Dad putting a bumper on it once. And it's a standalone bumper and a standalone bumper for right-hand drive because the it fits on a different way. So the poor old Channers nearly had a heart attack when they had to replace the bumper on this thing. But I found it in Sydney. A guy, you know, we were speaking of Zagato body cars. He had a Zagato Lancia and he had a 50s Maserati, and just in the middle of like suburban Sydney in this, you know, really nice sort of unassuming house, and a really interesting fellow. But that was sold by BEA New in Adelaide, along with another one. I think we got a cream one, and there was a tobacco brown one. That's a metallic green. And Mercedes, being Mercedes, you could get all sorts of different leather. So that's got almost what they call an alligator type leather, but you can get ostrich with all the little dots, and the trim on that's really cool. The perforations are little dot, big dot, 2 big dots, 1 little dot, like this special pattern. And to do them properly is crazy, but it's a full 4-seater, and you can jump in it and drive it. I haven't driven it since December, but I put it on charge actually on the weekend. I might drive it this weekend. It'll be the first time I sort of since we lost Dad that I'll drive it, but that's become my problem now. So I guess it's a nice problem to have, but it's a pretty cool car. I haven't brought myself to drive it since we lost him, but it's fun. It's got my son in it, and he's now 18, and I think it's time to break it out.
That'll be a special moment.
A
special moment.
I picked it up from his beach house. It's funny how, you know, people communicate to him and to you, and you can get nostalgic. But I drove it from their beach house down south and got in it, and it's got the old Becker radio in it, and I turned it on, and like one of his favourite songs came on in AM on the Becker radio, and it was a song in the end we used in the funeral service, and I told the stories. You know, how's this? I think it was Morning Is Broken. It was Cat Stevens or something. Anyway, and it was sort of like, you know, talking to me. So that was quite cool. You know, they have this good cars that just sort of soul that sort of transgresses, I guess, that transcends the people, you know, owning them over time, and probably. Certainly the 901 will outlive us as well, that 3.5, and you know, there's Daniel's photo. Yeah, that's cool. So, Dad used to lend it to people for weddings and stuff because it's, you know, these things to be enjoyed and shared and used, and it's a pretty special car, and it's
I definitely know that. Yeah, when our friend Daniel Scott's wedding, might be tuning in. I was lucky enough to be invited to his wedding, and as I actually think it might have been the highlight of the day for him. I probably did admit it, but I think it was probably the highlight of the day. Was getting around in the cab. Yeah,
it's fabulous thing to drive. They got a big V8, 3.5 litre V8, a light alloy engine, and it's got makes a great voice. It's got plenty of mumbo to sort of keep up with sort of modern day traffic, and it's a real coastal. You know, the woods and the timbers and the leathers and the carpeting and stuff. It's pretty special. So, you know, they built 65 of them in Ride and Drive. We only got 6, and I think one of them went to a coffee guy, a plantation guy in Papua New Guinea. Flew one from Sydney to New Guinea to drive around Papua New Guinea. So that car's come back. That's pretty cool. You know, anything that's one of 6 is pretty special. So that's it's a cool car. So we might try that out.
That must just be absolutely glorious on a summer's evening, hot summer's evening, top down the coast or something. Just must be incredible.
It's interesting, you know, we've all got different views, and I love a bit of motorsport. No hero with a motorsport car, but you know, it's hard to beat convertible and sort of arm on the edge, and you know, nice music in a balmy evening. It's not too hot, not too cold. A great road. Hopefully, there's a beach close, and you can just tootle along. You got enough grunt if you really want to. We don't have to be hustling and racing, all the time. That's why I say, you know, an SC and a 3.2 cab or a 3-litre 911 SC cab or even a 996 cab. You know, take the roof off. You don't have to be doing 200 to be having fun. I think these new 488s and McLarens and stuff. They're so quick that you're pretty much risking a jail sentence to get any fun out of them on suburban roads. And they got to be doing 8,000 RPM, and you got to be doing 150 to have any fun in them. But there's a lot to be said about just cruising along and a bit of style and a bit of grunt's good too. But it's a great way to drive a motor vehicle.
Funny thing you say, about your cab, the SC cab as well. It's like the coupe. Okay, maybe when they were new, there's an argument for the rigidity of a coupe and for that probably was a valid argument. But let's face it, any 30, 40-year-old car now, irrespective of what it is, it's flexy, it's soft, it's wallowy, it's not particularly fast. It's, so if you're looking for that experience of having a really taut, quick, fast sort of twitchy car, you're going to go and buy a lease or buy something new, buy a new GT3 or something. So anything old is for cruising anyway these days, really. So you might as well have the cab and have the full experience. That's kind of my view on it, at least if you're not racing.
Absolutely. And the Porsche convertible, I haven't seen it, but my son sent me some grabs of the O.J. Simpson documentary that's been on recently, and he's got a 930 turbo cab, in white that he's sort of tooling around in. And it's like, he's always had great cars. And I had Billy Ocean, get out of my dreams and into my car. The film clip was on the other morning, and I was having breakfast and had Rage on or whatever, and he's cruising around sort of trying to crack onto this girl in a white 930 convertible, and it was like, I grew up in the 80s, and the 911 convertible in the 80s, the badass lawyer on LA Law, which was the TV show we all used to watch. He had a white 911 convertible, and it was like, it was the car I had. Just like you either had a Merc SL or you had a white. Well, invariably they were red, but it was like white cars, and so fun value without having to feel like you're racing. I get the cafe racer thing, absolutely. Our group is cool, but there are times where you just want to tootle along and you got to get somewhere. I mean, I can drive that 65 911, and you're pretty tired by the end of it. It's hot, it's noisy, you got to sweat, wet back, sweaty, and if you're not driving anything sort of over 25 degrees outside, it's really it's hot inside, and it's like, but you've driven, you've travelled in the old sense of the word. So the comfort of a modern car is fun, but there's nothing beats just the roof off and cruising along and not needing to go too hard and too tricky, and it's not really having a destination too. That's always pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Stu, Luke, what do you reckon? Do we have anything else we need to discuss?
What was that?
Sorry, we just lost.
Sorry, I dropped out for a sec. You guys go.
No, we're good. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so yes, I know we all want coupes, but don't miss the right cab. And there are super ways, especially in the 911. But in any car, and it's almost like the 911 and the 300 SL Mercedes, the Gullwing, are the only cars where the hardtop is more than the convertible. It's counter-cyclical to everything you think about. Special cars. The drop head was always the rarer and the more valuable and the more special. And whether that's no one would choose an XK120 coupe over an XK120 Roadster because the Jag XK120 Roadster is like the quintessential 50s car. You wouldn't have a coupe if you could have a Roadster. So it's funny how 911s and Gullwings are my father's partner's got a Gullwing and a Roadster. And I've driven his Roadster, and his 300 SL Roadster is a fabulous car. It's just the roof's off. It's like a hotted up 356. It's 300 SL Gullwing's quite enclosed, and it's a hot car, and you've got to kind of the steering wheel tilts to get in, and it's a pretty. We were a lot smaller back then, I think. But don't get me wrong, I think they're an incredible thing. 300 SL is incredible.
Yeah.
We had one sold new here in Adelaide.
Really?
One new in Adelaide. Yeah, left-hand drive, the whole deal.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is the car that was in Freedom. That was an Adelaide car from you.
Wow. Is that car still in Adelaide now?
It's in the Bowden collection in Queensland. But Chris Bowden's family still own it. But it was Ian Cox's car who was the head of the Formula One here, and it's the car that's in the Freedom movie that everyone's going to go and watch. That was a wealthy Adelaide pastoralist ordered it new. Ridiculous. So we talked about fast cars. So along with the 901 and 65, the 55 government was lurking in the streets somewhere. So that was here in Adelaide.
Incredible.
So pretty incredible to buy.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Stu,
cool.
We probably should think about wrapping this one up. We're pushing 2 hours now. We got off to a bit of a bumpy start with our tech problems, but I think we've
froze again.
Yeah, I'm just talking to myself. So, and we're back.
And a bumpy finish.
And a bumpy finish. I spoke too soon.
Are you doing internet or is it still off?
Nah, I got to
off
up and sit forward for the next hour. Yeah, no, I'm on my phone. I'm tethering on my phone, so hence the dodgy internet. So thank you for bearing with me.
Cool. You've got little comments there. Excellent. Yeah. So for any Sydney listeners, the car's in at Porsche Centre, Sydney South, the 901. If you want to go and have a look, it's in the front window, and it'll head to Melbourne later in the year when I guess hopefully the COVID stuff dies off a little bit. So it's I've left it with them have it for as long as you want. That's cool, and we'll see when it gets back to town. So
yeah,
cool,
fantastic.
Is there anything? So where can people follow you and see you?
Anything?
Where can people follow you and see you on?
On
social media.
So yeah, I've got a little number plate business, as Colsey mentioned. So we sell historic plates, it's called. So you can find me on Instagram, and my Instagram handle, is that what we call it?
Handle
title is RHD Porsche, or right hand drive Porsche. So I've set it to private because I've sort of never got around to it. But send a request in, be sure to have do okay or whatever I've got to do. But I'm not very good at Facebook. But so yeah, historic plates or right hand drive RHD Porsche, and out and about. I think we have these nice things.
Who owns that white Ford Falcon U? The old plate.
Kind of mine, yeah. He's a super guy. He's got a cafe on Hutt Street.
He does. I see it all the time on Hutt Street.
Go in and support him. He makes great coffee. And go and buy some Two Hands wines, thanks to Michael, who gave us some drinkies tonight. Now I'll get some plugs in.
Michael helped us through the technical difficulties. Stress.
Two Hands for the Valley, just around the corner. Well, Angus, one of Angus's things he did, not only he had boats and bloody great cars, he if you like wine, he he planted the Hitchkey Mount Edelston vineyard in about 1919 as a 21-year-old, and Hitchkey owned that vineyard, but it makes one of the famous Australian single vineyard wines. And, Angus hand planted that. I took the car up there a couple of years back and sort of snuck in mid-vintage and took some photos of it in the vineyard.
We were there.
Yeah, you guys were. That's right. Yeah. So that's the vineyard. That's when we did the photography.
Mm.
Some of those photos. So yeah.
In issue 1.
Yeah. In issue 1.
Send us all a couple of cartons.
Absolutely. So, if you want to send us some, and we give him some advertising. Podcast. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
We'll work for one.
So thanks, fellas.
So you're around to find plates, sell plates.
Yeah. Time,
yes,
but the 901 still got 119 on it, which was issued in 1965, the original number, and the Angus family got issued that number in 1906 when they first got issued numbers. So that's been with their family, and fortunately came to me with the car. I bought it before they changed the rules, so I got to retain the number on the car. So that that history is fantastic. It just ticks the boxes. I got photos of him. He had he liked his French cars. He liked his Stellages, and I've got a photo of a South Chick special crazy body, large up to its ankles, and in some sand somewhere on the property, just driving it in the middle like there'd be a $5 million car to it. It was a paddock basher way back in the 30s when they had about 119s on the back of the South Chick body, the large, which is pretty crazy.
That's unbelievable.
He had one of the first holders that had 119 on. He had a Lancia that had when he was at Oxford Uni. I got a photo of 119 on his Lancia that he brought back with him from London. And they had Rolls Royces and Bentleys, all sorts of stuff. But he was a Porsche guy through and through. He was a real Porsche guy back in the good old days.
Yeah. So all right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for
you can find us at Sports Car Inquiry. Thank you for bearing with us. Calm down. But yes, accurate as well. So
Cool.